One house, one monthly payment, one of 4,499 loans in a single pool. Bundled together, that pool becomes one tower, and one floor of it is worth $12 million. And wrapped around that one floor, more than $50 million of bets. The bonds were real. The bets were not. And not one of them ever built a single house. This is the machine that took Wall Street's worst loans and turned them into the safest asset on earth. It never fixed the loans. It just relabeled them twice and then sold you the label as if it were gold. To feed a machine like this, you need raw material, loans, and lots of them. By the mid-2000s, lenders had stopped asking whether the loans could ever be paid back. In 2006 alone, lenders wrote about $600 billion of subprime. Nearly a quarter of every new mortgage in America was going to someone the industry itself rated a bad bet. The banks didn't stumble into this blind. They hired a firm to sample the loans before they bought them. And on those samples, 28% failed the lender's own guidelines. So what did they do with the failures? They waved nearly 40% of them right back into the pool. And the number that proved they knew never reached a single investor. Countrywide wrote more of these loans than anyone. Its own chief executive, in a private email, called one of its flagship products toxic. He'd use worse words than that, in writing. The official postmortem split over the causes. This episode traces one documented amplification machine. So let's watch one real tower get built. Not a diagram, a real deal. Assembled by Citigroup in September 2006, out of loans from a lender called New Century. 4,499 loans go in. $949 million of debt. The average borrower scored 626, and 2 of every 3 were on teaser rates set to jump. Money flows in at the top and drains down, floor by floor. Losses work the other way, eating up from the bottom. The top floors only take a hit once everything beneath them is gone. Old design, and a sound one. Because the top floors are cushioned by everything under them, the agencies blessed 78% of the tower with a AAA, the same grade they gave a U.S. Treasury bond. It rests on one assumption, printed into the math, that the loans can't all go bad at once. Florida, California, Ohio, they could never all flood together. The top slice was so trusted that Fannie Mae, the government's own mortgage giant, bought the whole thing. It paid a hair more than a treasury bond. Better yield, same safety. But the floors near the bottom, the ones rated BBB, nobody wanted. Too risky to sell to a pension fund. Too valuable to throw away. So they piled up, unsold. A problem worth solving. So Wall Street built a second machine to solve it. Take all those unwanted BBB floors from this tower and 100 others and pool them into a brand new tower of their own. Here's a real one. It swallowed a $9.6 million slice of our tower, then 187 more junior slices from other deals just like it. Nearly $1 billion of bonds went in. 45% of that pile was rated BBB or worse, junk, or one notch above it. That was the input. Now watch the other end. Out came a fresh $1 billion of brand new bonds, and roughly 88% of them were stamped AAA. The same junk went in. Gold came out. Nothing about the loans had changed. Same borrowers, same houses, same risk. Only the label changed, and the formula that allowed it was the same assumption, just stacked a second time. And this is not a conspiracy theory. The government's own official inquiry titled this section of its final report, and I am quoting them, "Achieved through some alchemy." And the people stamping the gold knew. 2 analysts at one agency, messaging about a deal, agreed. It could be structured by cows, and they'd rate it anyway. Another had already written the ending, hoping in an email that they'd all be rich and retired before the house of cards came down. Then it got absurd. At least half the leftover junk this machine spat out was fed straight into other machines just like it. A copy of a copy of a copy. And because these machines were so hungry for BBB floors, they started reaching backward, pulling worse and worse loans into existence. The demand created the supply. And it paid extraordinarily well. The 5 biggest banks running these machines watched their profits double, $20 billion a year to 43 in just 3 years. The third machine, where it stops touching the real world. No mortgage, no borrower. You just need someone willing to bet on whether the tower falls. They called it a synthetic, a mirror image of a real tower, built entirely out of bets. In the inquiry's own words, it did not finance a single home purchase, not one house. Remember our $12 million floor, the one labeled M9? Investors built 3 separate mirror towers just to bet on that one slice. And they gave them names: Ariga, Volans, Neptune. $12 million of actual bonds. More than $50 million of bets stacked on top of them. And by the inquiry's own count, more than 60 million could change hands on that one small slice. And the same slices got bet on over and over. One bank built 47 of these mirror towers, referencing more than 3,000 securities, one of them in 9 separate deals. The man who ran the mortgage desk at one of these banks put it as plainly as anyone. If there's a problem with a product, he told investigators, synthetics increase the impact. Signing off on the top of nearly all these mirror towers, promising to cover the losses, was one company. A $78 billion book of bets, with almost nothing set aside to pay them. The whole thing was wired to one clause in the fine print. A downgrade, not a default, not even a missed payment, could force that company to hand over billions in cash, immediately. The first demand landed in July 2007, a year before anyone had heard the word bailout. Goldman Sachs read those contracts and asked that one company for $1.8 billion. 13 days after that demand hit the desk, the man running the unit told investors he could not, without being flippant, imagine losing a single dollar on any of it. Every piece of this, every tower, every mirror, every machine, stood on borrowed money. Not for years. Borrowed overnight, and borrowed again the very next morning in a market called repo. The dealers were leaning so hard that for every dollar they actually owned, they had borrowed 30 more. Lehman, in 2007, was levered better than 30 to 1. The price of borrowing overnight is called a haircut. As long as everyone felt safe, it was almost nothing. When fear arrived, it climbed from near zero to nearly half the collateral's value. And that is the trap. Higher haircuts forced fire sales. Fire sales pushed prices down. Lower prices spooked lenders into bigger haircuts still. A bank run with no depositors in sight. Bear Stearns found out first. It walked into a Monday in March 2008 with $18 billion in the tank. By Thursday night, it was 5 sunrises. Lehman saw the same thing coming and hit it. It shoved $50 billion of borrowing off its books right before each quarter-end photo. So the leverage the world saw was a staged fiction. For a few years, the machine ran flawlessly, and the people running it got spectacularly rich. Pay at those same 5 banks swelled from $34 billion a year to 61. Someone asked the head of the biggest bank on the street if he was nervous. As long as the music is playing, he answered, "You've got to get up and dance. We are still dancing." And on the inside, they even had a phrase for the whole arrangement. IBG, YBG. I'll be gone. You'll be gone. Long before the bill ever comes due. Then the one assumption failed. The loans started going bad everywhere, all at once. And on a single day in July 2007, the rating agencies downgraded 399 subprime bonds at a stroke. And the floors that died first? The bottom of our tower. M9, M10, and M11. The exact 3 slices that Ariga, Volans, and Neptune, those mirror towers, had been built to bet on. Now every machine threw itself into reverse. The presses stopped stamping. New deals cratered, from $75 billion in a quarter to 27 to 12 to almost nothing. And every one of those mirror tower bets turned, all at once, from a wager into a bill. That clause everyone had ignored for years was about to do exactly what it was written to do. September 15th, 2008. The downgrade everyone had dreaded for a year finally landed on the company holding the $78 billion book, and the clause woke up. And it did exactly what it promised. The cash demands didn't rise. They exploded to $32 billion, owed right now on bets the company had sworn it would never have to pay. There was no cash, so the government stepped in with an $85 billion lifeline. Not to save the company, but to stop those bets from taking down everyone on the other side. By that week, the whole system was failing in real time. One giant institution a day. Just watch the calendar. September 6th and 7th. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two companies standing behind half the mortgages in the country, are taken over by the government across one weekend. September 15th, at 1:45 in the morning, Lehman Brothers files the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. $639 billion, gone by sunrise. That same week, a money market fund, the kind of account people treated as safe as cash, broke the buck. 97 cents on the dollar, sunk by the Lehman paper it held. September 21st. The last two great investment banks on Wall Street stopped being investment banks overnight, converting into ordinary regulated banks, just to survive the week. September 25th. Washington Mutual collapses. $307 billion. The largest bank failure the country had ever seen, and by then, it barely made the front page. To catch all of it before it hit the ground, the Federal Reserve more than doubled its own balance sheet, from $926 billion to $2.24 trillion in 16 weeks. And remember the safest asset on Earth? More than 80% of those top-rated bonds inside the Mirror Towers were eventually cut to junk. The label had always been a lie. When the money stopped flowing, the damage hit the ground floor, where real people lived. Somewhere around 10 million American families lost their homes. 8.8 million people lost their jobs. $19 trillion of household wealth evaporated. And the maddening part, the warnings had been sitting in plain public documents the entire time. One investor sat down and read the loan paperwork, line by line, back in 2005. Years later, he told the Inquiry he thought the whole disaster had been completely preventable. And the reckoning? $30 billion in settlements. Almost everyone paid without admitting a thing. The countrywide chief settled without admitting wrongdoing. Lehman's chief executive was never charged with a crime. In the entire United States, exactly one senior banker went to prison for the financial crisis. One. His name was Kareem Sarageldin, and he was sentenced to 30 months. And even he didn't go down for building any of this. He went to prison for hiding losses on his own trading desk. The machine that broke the world? That was perfectly legal. Almost none of this was against the rules. It was not a glitch, and it was not a few bad apples. The system did exactly what it was designed to do. And the skyline it left behind had fewer towers than before. But the ones that survived did not shrink. They grew, bigger and more essential than ever. It began with one house, one payment, one of 4,499. And the machine that turned that payment into $50 million of bets, it was never dismantled. It just went quiet.